I'm Luong from Blue Dragon Children's Foundation in Vietnam. I lead our anti-trafficking strategies and provide technical support across organizations. Blue Dragon rescues people from slavery and supports survivors and communities with a trauma-informed survivor-centered approach. Our on-the-ground experience, research, and community work contributes to national and regional efforts to prevent and combat trafficking. I'm here to share insights from Southeast Asia and the roles of civil society in filling gaps in victim protection and advocacy.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Pforte, and I'm coming to you from Hong Kong, where I'm the Executive Director of the Hong Kong Dignity Institute. Here we focus on integrated legal and psychosocial solutions for victims of human trafficking and forced migration. Our primary focus currently is conjugal slavery or forced marriage, and we are working hard not only to dissolve these marriages within the community here, but also to encourage the Hong Kong government to enact policies and legislation criminalizing forced marriage and all other forms of human trafficking here in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anita, Kanaiya, founder and director of the Freedom Project India. For over 20 years, I've been working at the front lines of human trafficking prevention and survivor rehabilitation across India. My journey began with grassroots intervention and rescue operations with law enforcement and has since expanded to systemic advocacy and policy work. At TFP India, we work directly with vulnerable communities, especially migrant children and youth, to prevent trafficking before it starts. We've pioneered interventions on child begging, forced child begging, and we are proud to be part of a state high-powered committee on trafficking advising the government. Our goal is to bridge the gap between policy and practice, ensuring that every survivor has access to justice, protection, and a future. In the context of today's panel on trafficking trends in South Asia, I bring insights from TFP India's work at the intersection of migration, child exploitation, and community empowerment, themes that I believe deeply resonate and are relevant to our evolving landscape of trafficking in our region. Thank you for this opportunity to share and looking forward to learning together.
Hello everyone, this is Tariqul. Currently I'm serving as the Country Director for Justice and Care in Bangladesh. Our mission is to join forces to end human trafficking and slavery. Since last 15 years I've been working in the anti-human trafficking space. In Bangladesh, we closely work with the Minister of Home Affairs and have helped develop some key documents like victim identification and mutual legal assistance guideline. Presently, we are supporting the establishment of digital national referral mechanism in Bangladesh. We partner with Minister of Social Welfare to improve the shelter home-based services for the victims of trafficking, with Minister of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs to support expeditious and effective prosecution of human trafficking cases. We extensively work with our partners in India to support cross-border rescue, repatriation and integration of victims and prosecution of the traffickers involved. Our work has expanded to address human smuggling and labor trafficking across the region. It's a privilege to be part of this conference. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Traci Picciano, and I'm the Political and Economic Assistant at the United States Consulate General here in Chiang Mai. I love the region. I've been in Thailand for 10 years. I've been in Myanmar for 2. And at the consulate, I conduct research and provide reporting to the US government on a variety of topics, including domestic politics, policies, and economic developments. 2 of my primary focuses are human trafficking, which encompass both political and economic factors, and general security concerns. Thanks very much for inviting me to be a part of this conference. I look forward to getting to know new faces, reconnecting with old friends, and learning from you all. Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Who had a good lunch? Give me a wave if you had a good lunch. Hey, I reckon a rat is a little bit like a smorgasbord, an all-you-can-eat buffet for the mind. You get so much good teaching and information and learning over these 3 days, and I'm here just for 5 minutes to remind you to also care for your body and your spirit and your emotions over the course of these 3 days. My name's Age. I am a burnout and wellbeing coach and part of the Asia Freedom Network team. And I have experienced burnout myself, and I know what it's like to manage burnout over a long period of time. And I just really want to encourage you, when you need a moment to pause over the course of the next 3 days, please listen to your body, to your heart, to your spirit. You can use the refresh room to do that. There's all sorts of activities there, some colouring and essential oil blend making, all sorts of things. We also have some special sessions running. We have yoga tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for you early birds. Also Thursday morning we have a guided meditation at 7 o'clock. And tonight I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my burnout journey at 6 p.m. But before we get into some more great learning, we're just going to take 3 minutes to give a little bit of attention to our body, spirit, heart. So I want to encourage you to get comfortable in your seat right now. Put everything aside, put your phones away, and just get as comfortable as you can right now in your chair. If it helps you to focus, close your eyes. And just take a really deep breath in. And as you do that, as you breathe in, allow yourself to fully arrive here in this moment, just as you are. The good, the bad, the ugly, the challenges, just arrive as you are in this moment. And on your next exhale, just release any tension that you've been holding on to. Just let it go with the breath. Notice the solid foundation of the earth beneath your feet. And feel gravity's support gently holding you in place. Notice any physical sensations in your body, in the airflow around you. In this moment of calm, just ask yourself, how is my body feeling right now? Are there places of tiredness or tension that are asking for your attention? What about your spirit? What does your spirit need most in this conference? Does it need learning, nourishment, rest, connection, inspiration? I want you to remember over these 3 days that you are a human being. You're not just a learning, producing, doing machine. You are here just to take care of your whole self. So let a sense of permission wash over you. You do not have to do it all this week. You do not have to attend every session and go to every meetup. You do not have to be everything for everyone. You have the right to pause, to care for yourself and to leave space for rest. There might even be a session in the program that you decide to skip. Not out of laziness, not out of disrespect to the speakers, but as an act of self-kindness, to take a walk, to write in your journal, to take a nap. Give yourself permission over these 3 days to prioritize balance and caring for your whole person, trusting that a rested, nourished you will learn what's most important across these 3 days. Just take one final slow breath in, and again, let all of that tension that you've been holding release as you exhale.
Thank you, Age. I needed that. One of the things I love the most about ARAC conference is that we're a community and we care about each other, and we care about each other beyond just the work that we do, but we care about each other as people, as human beings, knowing that we're whole, we have families at home, we have other things on our mind. Our work's important, but we're also important as people. So thank you, Age, for that reminder. It was lovely. Just a couple of announcements for you guys. We had some issues with our headsets with some static and interference. Our team has found a channel we think will work. So if you're going to have the English channel rather than channel 1, we're going to use channel 37. To access that, you hit the 2 blue buttons until it unlocks, and then just use one of the blue buttons to scroll until you find 37. We still have channel 2 for Thai, Bahasa's channel 3, Khmer's channel 4. If for whatever reason you're having trouble with that, or you don't like a headset, you can actually access Huva. If you go to the session and click on the session, you can use your own headset to listen in on the audio translations in Huva as well. So that's also available for you. The other announcement I want before our speakers come up is just letting you know we had to do some tweaks to the schedule. We had a speaker that was ill, so we switched a couple things around. Look at your schedule for your breakouts just to make sure if you're like, I have it written down, I know where I'm going. We changed a couple things. So double check the schedule for our breakouts this afternoon and tomorrow, because we have done a couple of tweaks on that. So just want to make sure people make it to the right place. So I'm going to turn it over to Shantanu and his panel. I'm going to be talking about the current trends in Asia and what's going on here. So my panelists, y'all can come on up.
Thing to us, and which I particularly look forward to, because knowing the trends also sets the trajectory for our interventions, or should. And so this is, in that sense, something which is very important and should be. And we have 5 speakers, as you know, and we have one in absentia who couldn't get his visa, and between the 5 speakers, we have tried to cover most of Asia that we have in this room. While we were discussing, we figured that a big chunk of Asia is Central Asia, which we don't have presence in this conference ever since we started also, and maybe something we should think about. we will cover the most of the other parts of Asia in this. And I was thinking before we have the speakers here, maybe we could listen to Tariqul's video since he will not be here, and we can keep that in our minds as we discuss and see where the intersections are. So Joe, if you would mind playing.
Thank you, Shantanuda, distinguished panelists and respected audience. As we discuss the recent trends of human trafficking in South Asia, it is evident that the crime has become increasingly transnational, moving beyond border-sharing countries. Criminal networks have pivoted toward exploiting victims internationally for forced labor and commercial country-specific criminal networks have pivoted toward exploiting victims internationally for forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation. As these generate high profits and the proceeds are difficult to trace. Country-specific trends vary depending on national context. However, the broader regional picture is progressive. According to the UNODC report, the global number of victims detected for trafficking for forced labor surged by 47%. Labor trafficking is on the rise across the region. Bangladesh, Nepal, and India continue to be major source countries, especially for forced labor trafficking to the Gulf states, Malaysia, and within South Asia. ILO reports that more than 77% of global trafficking victims are exploited for forced labor. In Bangladesh, over 1 million workers migrate abroad annually. A 2022 IOM study found that 40% of them had experienced fraudulent recruitment practices. Many are stranded mid-journey and exploited, particularly in Central Mediterranean region. In Nepal, the Foreign Employment Board reported in 2023 that 65% of the complaints from migrant workers involve wage theft and exploitative condition, which are key indicators of trafficking. In Myanmar, increased internal displacement has heightened trafficking risk. Even estimates from late 2023 indicate that at least 120,000 individuals, both foreign and domestic, have been trafficked into scam call centers, and victims were coerced into forced criminality. Around 7,000 victims from 22 nationalities were rescued recently and repatriated. Sexual exploitation also remains widespread across India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, especially targeting women and adolescent girls. The UNODC South Asia report found that 49% of trafficking victims identified in India were trafficked for sexual exploitation. Online exploitation is also a growing concern. Interpol's 2023 report noted a 25% increase in live-streamed child sexual abuse cases originating from South Asia. The UNICEF 2022 report estimated that over 100,000 children are trafficked annually across South Asia. Children are trafficked for domestic work, bonded labor, and forced marriage, particularly in rural and disaster-prone areas. In India, over 35% of all identified trafficking victims in 2023 were minors. Digital recruitment for trafficking is rapidly increasing. UNODC reported a 70% rise in trafficking recruitment via social media. A global financial integrity report also estimated 5,000 illegal organ transplants occur annually in South Asia. Cross-border trafficking along the India, Nepal, and Bangladesh-India borders has remained a persistent issue over the years. Traffickers particularly target women and children for commercial sexual exploitation and bonded labor. While the number of Nepali nationals rescued in India has declined recently, this doesn't necessarily indicate a reduction in trafficking. It may reflect a shift in the traffickers' modus operandi. Similarly, the identification of Bangladeshi victims in India has reportedly decreased, again attributed to evolving trafficking methods. Despite this, a recent major rescue operation in Pune, India, resulted in the rescue of 45 victims, including 8 Bangladeshi nationals, highlighting that the threat remains significant. A disturbing recent trend has emerged involving 41 Bangladeshi migrant workers who were illegally employed in Malaysia. They were deceived with promises of being taken to Australia for better opportunities. Instead, they were trafficked to Indonesia, where they were brutally tortured. The traffickers then forced them onto a boat headed toward the Australian border by sea. The group was ultimately intercepted by the authorities and deported back to Bangladesh. Thailand-Myanmar border, the corridor remains particularly concerning due to the trafficking of individuals into scam centers, as well as undocumented migration. Migrants along this route are frequently subjected to forced labor and other forms of exploitation. Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh are especially vulnerable. UNSCR reports that thousands of adolescent girls and unaccompanied minors are being targeted, forced into prostitution, and trafficked across borders. The trends observed in South Asia reflect a mixed pattern. While forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation remain highly prevalent, trafficking dynamics often shift based on the risk-reward calculus of traffickers. Victim identification, particularly of male victims, continues to be a major challenge in the region. According to UNODC, male victims are significantly under-identified, making up only 15% of all identified victims, despite the high incidence of labor trafficking among men. Another critical obstacle is prosecution of organized criminal networks operating across borders. The use of mutual legal assistance in criminal matters related to trafficking is almost absent in the region. As a result, conviction rates remain below 10% in South Asia, according to UNODC. To effectively combat this highly organized transnational crime, it is essential to align domestic legislation with regional and international standards, strengthen interagency and cross-border coordination, and facilitate the real-time exchange of intelligence among source, transit, and destination countries. Thank you.
I think Tariqul's focused on quite a few relevant points, particularly the transnational nature of trafficking. And in the South Asian context, we have India and Nepal, we have an open border where you don't need any visas and passports to cross. India and Bangladesh and India and Myanmar have porous borders where the border is patrolled very loosely, and so they are conduits of trafficking. Also recently I was doing some work about the Asian highway, which passes through Thailand and eventually will end up in Tokyo sometime, but it passes through several countries: Nepal, India, Myanmar, and that has actually facilitated a new trafficking route for Nepalese women from Nepal to Thailand and then elsewhere. Earlier it used to be westward via India, but now the highway has made it possible to go into Thailand and proceed from there. Anyway, let's listen to our panelists. Traci, would you go first? If you have PowerPoint, there's a clicker there. Right.
Hi, everyone. Really is my pleasure to be here today. I feel like I'm surrounded by a room full of heroes that do amazing work that often goes unrecognized. So thank you on behalf of myself personally and also U.S. Consulate General Chiang Mai for the work that you do. So I work at the consulate here in Chiang Mai for the U.S. State Department. The U.S. State Department is the agency that has been charged to collect information from posts around the world and forward that information along with individuals that also contribute directly to the JTIP office in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. TIP report. So what is the TIP report and why does it matter? Across the region, many types of trafficking exist. We all know that. A lot of it's been around for generations and generations. But the tip report has the ability to look at it more broadly from the perspective of the actions governments take in order to counter trafficking. So when you look at the actual work, there we go. There's 188 participating countries for the tip report. The tier ranking is what the countries' governments typically are interested in. And those rankings define whether they're meeting best efforts to meet the definition of the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. The report gathers information from all of you in this room, from individuals, from governments, police departments, social welfare agencies. Anyone who has a touch on anti-human trafficking is welcome to submit information to Washington, D.C. for consideration into this tip report. So it's not a singular source of information. It's collaborative that's focused on, again, like I said previously, the efforts from the government. So typically the government shouldn't be saying the work that you're doing and taking credit for it. They should be talking about their collaboration with you, but really the tip report's interested in actions on protection, prosecution of victims, and prevention of anti-trafficking efforts. This is the tier ranking guidelines. So tier 1, it's hard to meet. It means you're meeting minimum requirements for the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. But the tricky part is you have to continually make progress towards these efforts each year. So you don't make it one year and then it doesn't evolve. Each year you have to show that you're progressively taking increased actions and efforts. Tier 2 is where the majority of countries in the world lie, and that means they don't quite meet all of the minimum standards, but they're making really good efforts to hit those goals. Tier 2 watch list is tier 2 with a caveat. So you're striving to make those standards. You haven't quite met them yet, but you're trying. But the tricky part about the watch list is it has 2 caveats. So you're making efforts, but the estimated number of victims of severe trafficking forms is significant, and the country government is not making proportional concrete efforts or actions, or there's a failure to provide evidence of increasing efforts from the previous year. So again, it's an action that governments continually have to improve upon each year. Tier 3 are countries who do not fully comply with minimum standards and are not making efforts to do so. So where do we stand in Asia? This is East Asia and the Pacific. This encompasses, for our purposes, 13 countries. I'm sorry, wrong slide. 29 countries. And this is, I think, from what I know, most of us in here. There's another slide with a few other countries. So we've got 29 countries, and you can see their tier ranking, the majority of them in tier 2. If you look at Thailand, which is considered a source country, or not a source country, I'm sorry, a transit country under tier 2, it's surrounded by Cambodia and Burma, which are both tier 3, Laos, which is tier 2 watch list. So that can be indicative of government actions and the effect on transit countries. I have Malaysia in there twice. They're only there once. Only once for you, Helen. South and Central Asia, 13 countries. So you can see this list here. There are no tier 1 countries in South and Central Asia. This is 2024 tip report. The 2025 tip report has not been released yet. So you can see that the tip ranking kind of gives a global overview of government progress and dedication toward eradicating human trafficking. Why do countries care? Countries use this data to formulate policy, to implement laws. They want to get that next tier ranking. Some countries care more than others. Those of you in this room are from different countries, and Thailand loves the tip report. They really strive to get to the next tier and to maintain like a really good tier ranking. It really just depends on the country's government, how much weight they put behind its worth. Victim demographics have shifted. Looking at the tip reports from all these countries, in addition to the historical types of trafficking. So we're not losing the historical types of trafficking in the region, but we are gaining a few. For our region, we have multiple types of human trafficking, but I think the interesting thing for me to look at in the 10 minutes that I have is to zoom back and see across the trip reports what commonalities did I find? What common threads when it comes to trafficking trends did I see? And there was two, the first of which is digital technology. So if you look at all your types of trafficking, guaranteed every single one of them has some type of digital technology involved somewhere, somehow. Even if it's as basic as a cell phone, there's digital technology involved. So layers of criminal digital sophistication have made trafficking easier for perpetrators to hold this layer of anonymity and to also pursue their victims through digital technology. It's expanded the reach of our perpetrators. So instead of, relying on person to person, relying on maybe phone, maybe small networks, or even transnational organized criminal groups, there's very few that are global, but now we have perpetrators with a very easy global reach. Use of artificial intelligence has removed certain barriers from criminals. Language, human props, voice and face cloning, the list goes on and on. I'm not a technology specialist. I can just tell you what I see from the tip reports and what I hear from many of you out there in the audience. Digital technology is twofold. Yes, it can expand the perpetrator's reach, but it also can broaden resource accessibility for our victims and our survivors. So there's situations where there's those of you in this room who have been able to find, locate, and rescue victims from using their GPS coordinates or pinging their cell phones. Law enforcement can use these types of tools to find people and to rescue them or to assist them in some way. That also broadens to survivors when they are rescued and they're in a safe place, but perhaps they need more support. They can go online, they can find all of you out in this room to get the support that they need more readily. Satellite images have helped researchers map the movements of perpetrators, industrial scam centers. Law enforcement have an avenue for intelligence and evidence collection. I'm just using some examples to really paint the picture of how integral the technology is in this field. That brings us to another issue of technology. Because it's used in crime, are our laws keeping up? Are the government's policies and regulations keeping up? That's a loaded question I think we all know the answer to. Traffickers are operating within loopholes. These are educated, savvy people who know how to circumvent the systems. So because there's inadequacies that exist, and this is across the board globally, way beyond our region, the investigative digital literacy with our law enforcement counterparts, they usually have units, but to ask entire countries to have every law enforcement investigator well-versed in technology, decrypting phones, pulling information off of phones. I mean, this takes expertise that is not the average frontline law enforcement officer in any country. And I think that the perpetrators capitalize on that. There's a plethora of information for both nefarious use and good use. But countries in the region and globally, like I mentioned, they are struggling to keep pace with criminals on technology. In addition to looking at technology for good and for bad, keep in mind for your own reasons, your own organization's technological safety. If you've got computers with a lot of victim information or your intelligence that you've gathered, your information that you've gathered, just be sure that you're using proper technology security to protect yourselves and what's on your computer. If you are connected enough in your communities, which I'm sure many or most of you are, you could also be a target from perpetrators or from organized criminal groups to access your data. Sorry, but I threw it out there. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details of how technology can be used for crime, but I did want to touch on the second factor that I noticed in researching these TIP reports and the information that you guys have all provided for these reports is economics. So root cause of vulnerability is economics. Many people are trafficked for economic purposes. Many people become traffickers for economic purposes. Transnational organized crimes function for profit. So I think that when you look at financial tracing, that's something that is under-investigated in this field. It's a key correlation. I know that with the men and boys session earlier, you guys were talking about livelihood programs and economics being a lure and a vulnerability for people that are sucked into trafficking. And I couldn't agree with you more. Without financial gain, which is a primary motivation for trafficking, I think a lot of it would be rectified. But that's not an easy thing to do, right? It's not an easy thing to investigate. It falls back in lines with loopholes, laws, regulations, and policies, which is important to provide evidence and information to your law enforcement on financial tracing and tracking. Talk to your counterparts, find out what kinds of things are useful to them so that they can work their way up and take the financial gains away from these situations. On the flip side, we've got victims who may be selling self-generated child abuse materials so that they can pay for their school. I know that there's a lot of reasons that kids and adults get sucked into trafficking, and they may think that maybe it's a risky profession or a risky job opportunity, and it develops into a trafficking situation, and we see that a lot in Thailand specifically. So if we have more livelihood programs, which a lot of you do have, I think that's a really key piece for prevention. So the common threads that I'm seeing impact the region in trafficking is the role of digital technology, capacity to target criminal financial infrastructure, and the economic plights that lead to vulnerability for trafficking. That's all I've got for you. Did I make 10 minutes? Was I close? Okay, all right. All right.
Provocative ideas which we need to deal with. I don't know whether we have dealt with them, particularly the whole digital space and the artificial intelligence space. But we'll come to that. We'll take questions right at the end, but please key them into the app so that we have them at one go. Jennifer, would you?
Okay, thank you so much. Traci, thank you so much for going over the TIP report. I think that's always very interesting and a helpful reminder for all of us within the sector. It's also very helpful for us to know that we are not alone. We're not operating in silos as we often feel like we do. So I'm coming from Hong Kong. And I'll just start out with a quick quote from Hong Kong government from a few years ago. They said, "Trafficking in persons is never a prevalent problem in Hong Kong, and there has never been any sign that Hong Kong is being actively used by syndicates as a destination or transit point for trafficking in persons." However, I don't know if any of you noticed, but Hong Kong is on the Tier 2 watch list. And I think we are the only Asian tiger that is on the Tier 2 watch list. So there is a very significant discrepancy in what the government recognizes as a problem and what the TIP report, what organizations on the ground, and what the Hong Kong police force recognize. There are several Hong Kong organizations here, and we are all working in this space, and we do see that there are significant problems. There are 5 areas that we see in Hong Kong, and I'm not going to talk about all of them in depth. I'll focus on one, which is the most interesting one for my organization. But first, I'll just mention that one area where Hong Kong government is making quite some efforts is regarding the scam compounds. So we've had a number of Hong Kong citizens who were rescued out of the scam compounds both in Cambodia and Myanmar. And my organization has helped with just one, and we know that there are many more. So this is an area that is emerging and new for us. I think all of us from every country, I don't think anybody is unaffected by this. So that is one area. Then the next 3 are quite traditional for Hong Kong. I'll mention we're a very, very developed city. We have a very strong rule of law. So many people are surprised that trafficking is indeed an issue. But the couple areas that I'll talk about are forced labor, sex trafficking, forced criminal exploitation, and then the last one is forced marriage. Much like a lot of the Asian tiger countries, we have a very significant migrant domestic worker workforce. So this is falling into forced labor. Of course, not all of our migrant domestic workers are victims of trafficking, but they represent a significantly vulnerable population, whereby women are recruited from abroad to come and work in our homes, take care of the children, take care of the elderly, and this is extremely common. Right now, we have about 375,000 migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong, and this is estimated to balloon to about 600,000 in the next 2 decades because of our rapidly aging population. Now, within this population, there's a high degree of vulnerability. Within this sector, we are aware, many organizations work on this, that there can be deceptive recruitment practices. There are circumstances where when women arrive, the job that is given to them is not what they expected. There are nefarious recruitment agencies that exploit women. There are individual employers who also exploit women and men in these circumstances. And what we see is pretty common amongst the different areas of exploitation. It's the withholding of identification documents, withholding of wages, and modern slavery-like conditions. Similarly, within the forced labor kind of umbrella, we see similar practices in construction. So migrant domestic workers is largely a women's issue. Construction and recycling plants is largely a male issue. Similar things, deceptive recruitment, withholding of wages, withholding of identification documents, and even more nefariously, oftentimes you will see that employers of people who were recruited either from abroad or from within irregular status populations in Hong Kong, when it comes to payday, they will be the ones to actually call immigration or call the police and say, hey, there are a bunch of undocumented illegal workers here, come take them away. And so in this way, they are able to skip out on paying wages, and these individuals just kind of get recycled through this system of exploitation. There's a lot more to forced labor within Hong Kong, but moving on, I see colleagues out here who are working on sex trafficking within Hong Kong. Hong Kong is part of a pretty well-known circuit of sex trade, being from African countries to Thailand to Macau, Guangzhou, Kuala Lumpur, and Hong Kong. Many of the clients that my organization serves have come through this. Now, I really appreciated from the previous panel, Jasmir talked about soft trafficking and men who go into the commercial sex industry willingly, but then become vulnerable to trafficking. And oftentimes, we do see this in Hong Kong as well. Women who go into the commercial sex industry, eyes wide open, knowing I'm going to sell sex, but once they are within this industry, are very vulnerable to falling victims of sexual exploitation and being trafficked around the region. Similarly, we see within the commercial sex industry in Hong Kong, people who are actually brought into Hong Kong for the commercial sex industry and then coerced or forced into taking out a refugee claim, at which point they just become stuck in Hong Kong in the system, and their exploitation keeps going on and on. On the other hand, sometimes we will see people who are in the refugee system who fall victim to traffickers within Hong Kong. And they are already stuck in Hong Kong with very little financial support, and so they may become victims to traffickers within that space. I will direct you, if you have more questions about that, there's some experts sitting at that table over there. Next, forced criminal exploitation. This we mostly see with drug smuggling. Hong Kong immigration detention centers are full of foreigners and particularly women. And it has been estimated recently that probably about 20% of drug smugglers into Hong Kong are themselves victims of human trafficking. It is very difficult for organizations to get accurate statistics on this, of course, but we do see a lot of that, and my organization has worked with some victims within detention centers. But what I really want to talk about is forced marriage, which is something that is very surprising in Hong Kong. It's very surprising for me once I started working on this topic that in a place like Hong Kong, as developed as we are, in 2025, that this would be a prevalent issue, but it is. Basically, the way we see this manifest is we have significant populations of ethnic minorities who are citizens in Hong Kong, and within some of these communities, we do see that this becomes an issue. The modus operandi that my organization sees regularly would be a girl who is a Hong Kong citizen or permanent resident whose family brings her to their country of origin under the guise of a family holiday or something like this. And once there, she is coerced to marry a cousin or some relative of the family for the purposes of her sponsoring or him sponsoring this individual to come back to Hong Kong on a dependent visa. Once somebody is in Hong Kong on a dependent visa, they can legally work, no questions asked. So you mentioned financial underpinnings for this. This we see quite a lot of. The reason I believe that this is becoming more of an issue in Hong Kong is 2 years ago, there was a landmark case in which the first ever Sharia forced marriage was dissolved in the history of Hong Kong. My organization worked very hard on this, and it was landmark because there are jurisdictional issues because the forced marriages take place in a different country. And so historically, the Hong Kong courts have said, oh, we can't do anything about this. Despite the victim being a Hong Kong citizen, we can't do anything about this because, legal stuff from abroad. So since we were able to get this marriage annulled a few years ago, I guess it basically has just meant that now suddenly people have become aware. soon after that case was successful in the courts, we got a call from somebody saying, I read about this in the newspaper, and that's my story. This happened to me as well. I didn't know that there was a name for forced marriage, but that's me. Can you do something about it? And then not too long after that, we got another call saying, oh, that thing that happened to that girl is about to happen to my girlfriend. Can you do something about this? And then another organization who also works with ethnic minority communities put out a wonderful report about forced marriage, and suddenly organizations are getting phone calls saying, hey, this is me. I didn't know there was anything that could be done about it. Can you do something about it? And so, these are issues that a lot of us did not realize could be possible where we are, but it's exciting to work on them now. And the reason I say this is because currently, what underpins all of these different areas of trafficking is right now, Hong Kong does not have any specific legislation specifically criminalizing all forms of human trafficking, which means that we operate from what we would call a multi-legislative approach. So there are there are some statutes in this ordinance or in this ordinance that that are used to deal with matters of human trafficking. But what it actually means is that there aren't really protections for victims of trafficking because it's not acknowledged. So the fact that we can work on these cases that have the potential to to be precedents. That first forced marriage case was a real precedent because it was the first time that forced marriage was brought to the Court of Final Appeals and the first time it was annulled, which means it's the first acknowledgement that conjugal slavery exists in our city. So it's exciting that we have the opportunity to work on things that can actually help the government in their efforts to lay a framework for dealing with all forms of human trafficking. I see I am done with my time. I did tell you, Shantanu, I can talk about this topic for hours. So I would love to share more with you all later. Thank you.
I just had a query. Actually, we have 47,000 domestic workers.
375,000.
Oh, yeah.
375,000.
So which countries would they be coming from?
Predominantly Indonesia and the Philippines, but we also have from Sri Lanka, India, many countries in Lake Chad area, really from all over the place. But the majority are Philippines and Indonesia.
Thank you. Sudong.
Hi everyone, I'm Luong from Blue Dragon Children's Foundation in Vietnam. It's an honor to be here, meet all of you at ARAT, and to share about current trends on trafficking in Southeast Asia. As Traci already says, a map of East Asia and Pacific. We are a group of 11 countries, however, we are very diverse in government efforts in tackling human trafficking. We include Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 2 watch list, and Tier 3, everything. Yes, so prior the COVID-19 pandemic, human trafficking in Southeast Asia primarily evolved, around sexual exploitation, forced labor, and forced marriage. Sexual exploitations mainly targets women and girls, and of course men and boys, trafficked domestically across the border for commercial sex in massage parlor, karaoke bars, tourist areas, brothels in countries like Thailand, Cambodia, the Philippines, and Indonesia. Forced labor targets men, women, and children across sectors in fishing, agricultural, constructions, and domestic work. Forced marriage, it's not really news compared to Hong Kong, but it's a traditional forms of trafficking in Southeast Asia, often ties to sexual exploitation and domestic servitude, affecting women and girls from Myanmar, Cambodia, and Vietnam, trafficked to China under the false promises of marriage or employment. And then child sexual online exploitations are also increasing because of the growing internet access and weak child protection frameworks. So migration, climate-related disaster, and inequalities are major drivers of vulnerabilities in Southeast Asia. The existing response system, like the legal frameworks, the services, and cross-border cooperations have struggled to keep up. As organizations and I are also working in the regions, for a long time we has been advocating for trauma-informed care, recognitions of forced marriage, anti-trafficking, human trafficking crime, better rights for migrant workers to prevent labor trafficking, and also greater attention to other forms of exploitations, for example, organ removal. And then suddenly the pandemic hit. Traffickers did not disappear, they adapted. Yes, so you can see here on the screen is a fence that China's built during the COVID time along border between China and Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar had disrupted previous trafficking routes and many organized crimes. So leading traffickers to adapt to new pathway of human trafficking through Southeast Asia. Another factors is, yes, the economic hardship deepened, and the post-economic recovery has been uneven across the region, and even within country, leaving millions underemployed or unemployed. So many who previously less vulnerable to human trafficking, now more vulnerable, and many takes high-risk migration routes, increasing their exposures to traffickers. Another is political instabilities in Myanmar, and then the special economic zones with preferential policies in Laos and Cambodia also creates new trafficking routes. Criminal organized crimes networks have developed large criminal hubs, turning those countries into new hotspots for human trafficking. And another factor is Traci already mentioned, technologies facilitates human trafficking. It also expanding. Yes. So as a result, the region has witnessed a new form, not entirely new, of forms of human trafficking named forced criminality. But it's not entirely new, but it unprecedented related to its scale, impact, and rapid development. People, many men, are lured by fixed online jobs or by acquaintances promising jobs in Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and other countries. When they arrive, they are held in guarded compounds, subjected to threatened torture, and forced to run online scam online. Yes, so if they refuse to do the work or cannot match the scamming indicator, they are beaten and then maybe sold to another syndicate. Yes, you can see on the screens, here are groups of 42 Vietnamese people. They try to escape a compound in Cambodia, close to the borders with Vietnam. And then in that incident, teenagers boy died, another were crossed by trafficker, and 42 get free, come back to Vietnam by screaming. Yeah, so in 2023, an UN report estimates that at least 220,000 victims from over 40 countries are being housed in Myanmar and Cambodia alone. And then just last June, Interpol have warned the globalizations of scam center, with now victims come from not over 40, but 66 countries, and 74% of them are brought to scam centers located in Southeast Asia. So the human trafficking landscape in Vietnam has, in Southeast Asia, just had changed in profound way. Let's take a look at Vietnam's at a case study to see what it means. So in Vietnam is primarily a source countries of human trafficking. For a long time, all of the cases of trafficking we deal with within the country and across border to China. But now, as you can see, the first thing happened to us is the increasing numbers of victims we can rescue. Is the numbers of victims Blue Dragon, my organization, have rescued each year is double compared to the pre-COVID-19 period each year. And then sex trafficking to China is still an issue. However, now it's less significant. The majority of forced criminalities are to new destinations in Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos. Yeah, so cause much issue for us. Another aspect is, yes, so more new destination like before majorities in China. So now our teams have stressed ourselves to different area and destination countries to manage the work. Secondary, another issue is the increase of female, like male survivors. Before the pandemic, 99% of human trafficking trials in Vietnam involved women and girls who are trafficked to China for forced marriage and sexual exploitation. Now the majority of victims, more than 60% of total survivors come back to Vietnam are male. Our system, our protection system in Vietnam, thus were built to support female survivors of forced marriage and sexual exploitation, struggle to respond to the rise in forced criminality victims. Vietnam just have no state-run centers for male survivors. And then as the panel discussion in this morning already addressed about the difficulties in dealing and working with male survivors, it's happened the same in Vietnam. Gender-rooted stereotypes mean that societies and victims themselves don't always recognize men as survivors. Sex trafficking, male survivors, female survivors of sex trafficking suffer from very significant stigma. However, male survivors of forced criminality, they face another issue because they fall further behind and outside the society ideas of ideal victim. It must be female, innocent, but now they are men. They're young, they commit unlawful acts. So making access to support much more difficult for male survivors. And another issues we face here is, with these new forms of exploitation, the boundary between human trafficking victims causes into committing unlawful acts and cyber fraud perpetrator has been blurred. Many male survivors, when they come back, they feel reluctant to cooperate with authorities out of fear, and then they quickly leave their localities in search of work to repay the debts their family incurs to pay the ransom for their freedom. So the continuums between victims and trafficker also emerges. When many victims are forced to recruit friends or acquaintances in exchange of their freedom or reductions in ransom. Yes, so there's a cases we have dealt with is that in the same trafficking court, there's an individual appear in court both as a trafficking victim, but at the same time as a defendant trafficking charged with trafficking others. Yeah, so the system is not ready, the legal framework is outdated. That's the issues here with the emerging trend. So like as what needs to happen, from what we learn across the region, there are many things need to be done. Trains, frontlines, provider, foster cross-border cooperation, and other stuff. However, as a civil society working in the region, I think that and Blue Dragon, we step in to fill the gaps, and then we can contribute in the two biggest things. The first thing is Yes, to provide support for survivor. So we rescue victims from scam compound, recognize and provide support for all of them regardless of gender and also forms of exploitation, offer reintegration support, ensure their safety and dignity. And another aspect is the legal representation to protect the victim rights. So Blue Dragon Lawyer provide legal support for survivor to work with authorities so we can ensure that the victim screening and then the identification process are carried appropriately. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that 60% rise in male survivors. What forms of trafficking are they coming from?
The forced criminality?
Forced criminality?
Yeah.
Interesting that is. Normally you would assume that, as you said, gender stereotyping, women would be the considered victims in a forced marriage. But that's very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anita, please.
Right, I have the ominous job of finishing off for the whole day. We've had a long day today, and I also have the job of speaking for 1/4 of the world's population. I have South Asia. That's 2 billion people. India can count for the majority of it, but the countries are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Bhutan, Afghanistan. So you know what this could be. Now these are countries where traditionally trafficking has been a huge issue. India is transit, source, destination, all of that within the country itself. You know, people are sourced within. You don't have to go outside India to be trafficked, just within the states. I was trying to explain to somebody about the state that I'm in and the work that we do. So they said, oh, you're only doing work in your state. I said, in India, states are like countries. The population is so much, the language barriers, the regions. So I just want to touch a little bit about the current trends in the region. But thank you, Traci, for that wonderful presentation, which really spoke about what the tip looks at and how it collects information, but also the trends on that. So I think to look at trends, we have to see what was, to see what is and what it is turning out to be. And I think one of the most positive things about this is to see the increased number of people, even this conference has more people attending this year, who are committed to the cause. And even though that is not a good thing because we want the cause to go down, but it is to show that there is a lot more awareness being created, there is a lot more involvement of people, and I think that is a positive trend for us to look at as we look at everything else to do with trafficking. What has changed in these regions? I think some of the terminology and the types of trafficking, traditionally they were the top three, which was forced labor, trafficking for forced labor, trafficking for forced marriage in the subcontinent itself, with the gender ratios being quite skewed. I think a lot of it had to do with children being killed, girl children being killed, especially in India. And so people were trafficked across borders for marriage. And so that brings us to the third one, which is forced marriage. So these were the traditional top three. But I think, as everybody else has pointed out, there have been newer forms that have come. And one of the most interesting ones that I came across recently in the work, and I've been working in this field for 25 years now, has been trafficking for skin grafting and implants. And you know, we were just wondering, how does this happen? You've heard of organ transplant, and you've heard of people being trafficked for that. But a lot of cases came up, and some from the city that I'm from, Bangalore, where there were girls from Nepal who had been trafficked to India so that their skin could be harvested. And then the tissue and cells are sent on to the US, where they're then made into products and brought back to India. And this is for fairer skin. This is also for treatment of skin disease. Now that is a form that is very, very recent and new, and I think we're still dealing with how do we address issues like this, because a lot of the times when the skin is grafted, it happens inside brothels. So I think a few of the victims and survivors, when they were released, realized that they had similar scars. And we think that skin is grafted from places where it's quite visible, but no, it was from the back. It was from places where it was not so visible, but it brought down their price. And so they had to work doubly hard to be able to get customers because they were scarred in places. The other trends that have kind of emerged are to do with the boon and bane of digital platforms and digital technology. I think in tracking and tracing victims, digital technology has just proved irreplaceable now. With the GPS tracking, with us being able to trace the phone towers so we can identify where victims have been hidden. But it also has to do with traffickers being able to source more online now. So when COVID hit, India was one of the countries where we had a very strict lockdown. And so schools went online, which meant that children were online for classes and much more. So they had access to mobile phones, younger children, and so social media, Instagram, all of that, accounts were opened, and we realized that a lot of them started receiving messages or were recorded or were forced into recording stuff about themselves, and it was all out in the internet. So I think it changed a little bit about how the traffickers didn't have to go to vulnerable places, but the digital platform became a vulnerable place. And it became more so because of what happened with COVID and the changes that happened. I think one of the big things that happened with COVID was that brothels shut down. I don't know about other regions, but in India and many other places, people just wanted to go back to their home places. So people who are running brothels, what we couldn't do in years of advocacy, in years of working, COVID managed to do in India. And we thought it was over, or it's going to take time for them to rebuild, but it came back with a vehement force. And it is now, the whole digital angle to this has just made it so difficult to try and trace and track victims now that they are back in force. Traci mentioned the economics of this. It wouldn't happen if there was no money in it. And I think what COVID did was it shut down industry in many places, factories, illegal factories, and this region of Nepal, India, Bangladesh, all of them have a lot of those kind of places where they employ children or they employ people who are non-people. They don't exist. So there are no employment contracts, there are no labor contracts. And when these places shut down, then a lot of money was lost. So when COVID disappeared, these people have reinvented themselves, and a lot of trafficking started happening for recruitment to these places or to these factories. And the digital platform has just provided that space for them. I think with regards to the word displacement itself, I think that's displacement and trafficking are now a very new trend. If you look at the region that I'm talking about, there's been a lot of political instability in this region. Every country, you name Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, they've all had a lot of instability and therefore a lot of migration and refugees. I think all of us will be aware of the Rohingya crisis and what resulted from that. But I think one of the things that has made this very difficult, not just with the displacement and trafficking, but with the fact that a lot of these people are non-people, or you can get documents, especially if you're coming into India for work or recruitment for a job or you've been trafficked, you actually can get an Indian document. And oftentimes during rescues, they will produce the document to say that they're citizens of India, but obviously they're not. And it has just happened because you can buy these kind of things. So I think it has compounded the fact that trafficking before was from natural disaster sites or from places where vulnerabilities existed, rural areas where recruitment could happen. But displacement has now made refugee camps places for this. You know, places where camps have just come up and there isn't much invested in those places or the surroundings or the people, that it has made it possible for trafficking to happen from within those supposedly safe places or places where people should be protected. I know Shantana's got the mic, so you have a question or am I finished?
Yeah, I think it's good to finish because it's kind of, we should have some questions.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Then you also need coffee.
Okay. We look like we need coffee, so let's let's take some questions.
Are there some questions?
We have one question, which is, as trafficking routes and methods continue to evolve, how can governments strengthen real-time, cross-country coordination to prevent trafficking, especially when resources are limited and cases are rising?
I don't know who wants to take that.
I think I can speak just on the experiences that I've seen in Thailand. Thailand has had a few multilateral, I don't want to say the word task force, but multilateral agreements with neighboring countries to facilitate repatriation of scam victims. It's not a perfect process, but it is a collaboration between the key partners to make that happen. The citizens that they brought over to repatriate were from 40 some odd countries, so not specifically to those 3 countries, but it does take some spearheading from one country in collaboration with neighboring countries to make that happen. But it is effective on one sense to repatriate people home. The downside of it from the Thailand experience was the victim-centric approach and the identification process seemed to have taken a bit of a back seat to repatriation. So there's 2 sides to it, but I think it's a place to start and improve upon.
So from my point of view, and other aspects, that can focus on the data collection and data analysis, make data accessible. Like the case of Vietnam, when some case already happened and already occurred, there's no information, no data sharing between agency, between government agencies and other stuff. So we need the prompt response, but without any information, we can do that. Yes, where the victim comes from, who are traffickers, and then that's why the data sharing is so important. I don't know about other countries, but at least in Vietnam, the government officer numbers is so late and poor, like only the total numbers of cases, total number of traffickers, total number of victims, that's all. So based on those informations, how even NGOs, international organizations who want to support, who want to do how we can do and design our interventions.
I think India has done a lot in terms of trying to collaborate with border nations. So very recently with the online scam compounds and the number of Indian people who had been recruited to these places. I think the foreign minister mentioned it at the Association for Southeast Asian Nations, and there was a group set up to work across border, not just to repatriate victims, but also to put preventive steps. So I think some nations are doing it in some areas and some forms of trafficking, probably the newer ones, but I'm not very sure about the old ones.
Sorry, can I jump in on that? I would like to agree with these 2. The data collection is so critical, and from Hong Kong perspective, I think for us primarily there needs to be an acknowledgement by the government that this issue does exist. We have many situations whereby there will be a victim who will approach the police, and the police will send them to immigration. Immigration will send them to the Labor Department. The Labor Department will send them back to the police. And even within these few departments, there's no communication about who this person is, what they might be suffering. And so if the departments within our government do not even speak to each other on this, it's a universal way for them to coordinate with others. I will say that with regards to the repatriation of citizens, we have, Hong Kong has had a very good collaboration with the Chinese government and then the consulates in Myanmar. So that is one process where I think that collaboration has been good because there is an acknowledgement that this is an issue.
So thank you very much for a very interesting conversation.